Greetings to everyone. Today, we begin with a story not often told, a story of Attawa, a small urban village nestled in the heart of Chandigarh, silently surviving in the shadows of Corbusier's grand vision. While the city around it was meticulously planned, it grew in its own rhythm, organic, resilient, yet largely invisible. This study is thus a call to reimagine the neglected fabric, to unfold the hidden narratives of spaces like Attawa, and to envision a future where even the forgotten have a voice in the urban story. Urban villages lie at the intersection of tradition and transformation, where rural life meets unplanned urban expansion, often without structured integration. Despite their growth, they present both challenges and opportunities for inclusive, resilient, and context sensitive development. This presentation aims to uncover the hidden potential of these often overlooked urban pockets. This project began with a quest to answer what happens to these urban villages that lie between the lines of planning. And thus, under the aegis of UVCT, we initiated the Urban Village Studio as an endeavor for studying urban villages towards envisioning brownfield development policy. Our journey to reimagine Ottawa is a meticulously structured process across several phases: site acquaintance, perception studies, digitization, preparation, physical site surveys, beginning with the context which laid the foundation by exploring the historical, cultural, and spatial dynamics of villages in Chandigarh, the action area identifying Ottawa as a representative case, reconnaissance survey involving site visits, pilot surveys, followed by data analysis for integrating all collected quantitative and qualitative data, phase 5 including interventions and policy recommendations which translated findings into proposals for spatial improvement, and finally phase 6, which was the application of AR/VR technology, enabling immersive visualization of design interventions, enhancing participatory planning and communication with stakeholders. Followed on, our story begins by examining the Chandigarh Master Plan, working backwards to trace the city's evolution. Given its proximity to numerous urban villages, our aim was to understand how the city developed and how these villages either diminished, adapted, or thrived amidst urban expansion. Chandigarh, a meticulously planned to be the administrative heart of the newly formed Punjab and a haven for refugees after independence. Nestled at the foothills of Himalayas, Chandigarh's development unfolded in phases with a grid-like setting designed by Corbusier. It developed in 3 phases with clear zoning and planning ideals. In its initial phase, it was built on a clean state, acquiring both agricultural land and existing settlements. However, in the second phase of development, a different approach was taken for 4 specific villages: Badel, Attawa, Butrela, and Badheri. The evolution of Chandigarh's urban villages was shaped by 1952 Periphery Control Act and the 1966 Punjab reorganization. While phase 1 was raised, most villages phase 2 retained some Abadi areas like Attawa. These villages evolved informally, creating gaps in planning, infrastructure, and governance within a modern cityscape. Chandigarh embodied order, progress, and architectural innovation, yet nestled within its grid-like structure, pre-existing settlements that continued to evolve alongside the city's modern planning ideals are these urban villages. Chandigarh contains 22 urban villages, both sectoral and non-sectoral, spread across phases. Looking at the sectoral villages, each of them differs in development and integration, and analyzing their current status reveals spatially inequality, lack of infrastructure, and the need for targeted policy reforms. Ottawa is amongst those in the second phase, lying in the sector 42. As observers of the urban realm, we found ourselves intrigued not by the grand sectors and the symmetrical grids of Chandigarh, but by the irregular, informal, inherited Ottawa. An urban village encased with the modern city's bones stood out, not for its design, but for its defiance. It refused to be forgotten. Caught between rural legacy and urban pressure, Ottawa symbolizes a brown field in limbo, land that is lived in, loved, yet left behind by formal development. This studio emerged from the need to explore this contradiction, to understand how we as future planners and architects can bridge the gap between policy and people, between structured intent and lived reality. And so the genesis of this project was not in the blueprints, but in the lived voices, the visible cracks, and the silent resilience of Ottawa. Coming on to the context and location of Ottawa, which is nestled amidst the planned sectoral grid of Chandigarh, it shares a strategic location in Sector 42 42, which is notable. It lies adjacent to major roads such as B3 and the stadium roads and sectors, making it well connected. It began as a rural agrarian settlement on the periphery of Chandigarh. With the city's expansion, it was absorbed into the planned urban grid as a part of Sector 42. Over a time, Attawa transitioned into a densely populated urban village with merely 2% as unbuilt in 2025. Attawa's fabric is a vibrant blend of tradition and transition. Narrow lanes, mixed-use structures, and dense housing reflects its organic growth. Amidst the formal grid of Chandigarh's sector, Attawa retains a distinct identity, marked by socio-cultural continuity, informal economies, and evolving land use shaped by community needs and urban pressures. Here is a video clip that showcases the on-site documentation. Exiting from phase 3, which was the reconnaissance survey, is the phase 4 data analysis. The figure ground relationship reveals a compact and dense built form with minimal open spaces. The built up areas dominate the landscape, leaving limited voids for green spaces or urban public use. The demographic study indicates a significant population increase, recording a growth rate of 30.1%. This steady increase in population and density reflects the ongoing urbanization of Attawa, transforming it from a rural settlement into an integrated part of Chandigarh's urban framework. The economy is largely informal, with the residents engaged in small business, service jobs, and daily labor. The workforce participation rate is relatively low, especially among women, indicating gender disparities in employment. The village, though, has a literacy rate of 78%, lower than surrounding urban areas due to limited access to higher education. Between 2008 and 2025, it witnessed a notable shift towards mixed-use development. Residential plots gradually integrated commercial activities, shops, workshops, and rentals, responding to urban demand and economic opportunity. The contour analysis indicates relatively flat terrain with minimal elevation variation, contributing to poor natural drainage, leading to frequent water stagnation during rainfall. Impervious surfaces across the village further hinder percolation, exacerbating flood risks. Attawa exhibits an irregular and organic street pattern typical of unplanned urban villages. The internal roads are narrow, limited hierarchy, and poor connectivity to surrounding sectors. Encroachments and mixed-use developments along streets further restrict movement, especially for vehicles and emergency services. Attawa has basic social infrastructure, including a few schools, religious centers, and local parks. However, these facilities are unevenly distributed and inadequately maintained. Also, the lack of proper community halls, libraries, and youth engagement further restricts social development. Key landmarks like GMHS, a sports complex, Kala Sagar lie nearby. Attawa has schools and religious sites, but limited health and recreational facilities affect residents' quality of life. It mostly depends upon the surrounding sectors 42 and 43 for infrastructure. The urban morphology reveals a story of unplanned growth. It shows loosely packed, unplanned growth in the core and moderately dense outer zones. It exhibits densely packed development with some moderately dense areas and a small cluster of closely packed informal housing in its core. This mixed development pattern strongly suggests an inorganic expansion within the village. With nearly half of the properties on rent, it has led to renting home spaces as shops, fostering mixed-use growth, boosting incomes, and of course adding to local resilience. Migration drives population growth, which in turn strains existing infrastructure. It indicates that lack of planning affecting the overall quality of life is evident in the residents. Further, most buildings are G+1 and compactly organized, highlighting congested areas with poor ventilation, lack of sunlight, and challenging emergency access. These conditions create health risks and limit visibility. Furthermore, with an unbalanced mix of residential and commercial, there is congestion, inadequate infrastructure, and strain on public services. Absence on zoning regulations had led to incompatible land uses affecting livability and environmental quality. There is a mix of all types of commercial activities happening, which has led to unauthorized commercial properties proliferating due to weak planning, governance, and regulatory oversight, as is evident here. With 80% impervious surfaces, Attawa lacks designated open spaces, resulting in a fragmented and informal open space typology. With no planned parks or public plazas, open areas are limited to leftover spaces, vacant plots, roadside edges, temple courtyards, and so on. Impervious surface mapping of Attawa reveals a high concentration of built-up areas, paved roads, and concrete surfaces, significantly limiting natural water infiltration, which becomes an inherited problem for surface runoff and leads to urban flooding. Pervious mapping highlights the limited distribution of surfaces that allow water infiltration, such as vacant plots, small green patches, and unpaved open spaces. The activity mapping reveals a mix of residential, commercial, and informal uses as concentrated along key streets and junctions. Peak period activity mapping indicates the dominating activities during different time zones. With commercial areas active throughout the day, it further depicts vibrant street life and continuous activity, highlighting the village's dynamic socio-economic environment. From the analysis of the survey, 8 core issues were identified. Spatial issues such as lack of open spaces and lack of parking. Furthermore, there are accessibility and mobility issues such as inadequate pedestrian spaces because of congested internal road networks, also leading to poor last mile connectivity. There are also issues which are definiting of lack of structural safety, and of course policy and governance issues because of no clear administrative classification, overlapping jurisdiction between municipal and state offices, and limited community participation in the decision making process. The next step was phase 5, which is the interventions, where the issues were further analyzed through a 5-day capacity building workshop that explored innovative approaches to reimagining urban villages by blending traditional wisdom with contemporary urban design. Students developed critical thinking, participatory design, and spatial analysis to address challenges of density, infrastructure, and identity. The workshop focused on identifying key issues through participatory brainstorming sessions, which were then synthesized into a comprehensive SWOT analysis. Moving on to the SWOT analysis, the strengths were primarily the strategic location of Attawa, its mixed-use character, the availability of brownfield pockets for which promoted development. The inherited weaknesses in Attawa were informal and unregulated growth, infrastructure deficits, ambiguities in land ownership and tenure, and low-end digital technological penetration. Of course, it had a lot of opportunities such as policy integration for brownfield regeneration, technology and enabled planning interventions, community-based regeneration, and the potential for socio-economic upliftment by leveraging Chandigarh's ongoing development for improved infrastructure and real estate investment. However, there were some threats such as gentrification and displacement risks, policy and administrative gaps, resistance to change by the community, as well as environmental vulnerabilities. So, building upon our insights from this SWOT analysis, we aim to address the pressing challenges while unlocking the hidden potential of Attawa. This led us to articulate a comprehensive vision to reimagine Attawa as a resilient, inclusive, and self-sustained urban village. This transformation is rooted in a holistic brownfield regeneration approach, one that respects and retains the identity, lifts its socio-economic fabric, and allows it to integrate organically into the evolving urban landscape of Chandigarh. To bring this vision to life, it was essential to define the broader strategic goals and the detailed on-ground actions. At the macro level, we focused on community and connectivity, emphasizing stronger social bonds, local economic revitalization, walkable environments, and improved mobility solutions to empower the people of Attawa. On the micro scale, our interventions aimed at improving core physical infrastructure such as roads, water systems, and sanitation, alongside expanding green spaces, designing inclusive areas, reinforcing ecological corridors, all in order to preserve Ottawa's identity. Flexible street alignments, negotiated land reorganizations, and the creation of community-centric nodes became central to our connectivity strategy. We identified key zones along primary secondary movement corridors and introduced gathering spaces designed as economic clusters with street furniture, local artifacts, pocket parks, vibrant public zones to bring life and purposes to these places. We proposed tools like transfer, development rights, land swapping, selective property acquisition to redevelop underutilized or structurally weak buildings. This allowed us to free up space for new, well-connected streets and open pockets, reducing congestion while weaving in new communal hubs that support local interaction and mobility. Multi-use zones were introduced in repurposed open areas to accommodate diverse urban functions, ranging from kiosks, vendor stalls, and play zones, seating cover spaces, and informal market spaces. Dark, underused alleys were transformed with parametric street installations and fire-safe urban elements. We envisioned wider street not just for traffic but to redefine the character, introducing informal gathering spots that reflect the vibrancy of the local culture, encourage social cohesion. Pedestrianization measures such as bollards, shared street concepts were proposed to foster safer, more accessible and adaptive urban spaces that invite people to walk, pause and interact. Targeted identification of open pockets enable us to introduce well-planned green spaces, parks and public amenities like toilets, thereby strengthening both the ecological and infrastructural backbone of this village. Each intervention was carefully designed to align the existing vehicular routes and service networks, ensuring practical, implementable solutions that respond to Ottawa's present needs while accommodating its future growth. Based on the vision, the community integration, physical improvements and ecological considerations, we now present a set of brownfield policy recommendations. The recommendations focus on 7 key areas: context-sensitive urban planning, which is development of village-specific planning guidelines within the Chandigarh Master Plan, in situ redevelopment with community participation, economic revitalization and skill development, land ownership and tenure regularization, sustainable and climate-responsive design, which is a mandate, green infrastructure, incentivizing adaptive reuse and resource-efficient building materials, and encouraging cooling strategies and integration of technology and digital mapping. Furthermore, institutional and policy integration, establish a brownfield regeneration cell, integrate policies with national missions, and encourage public-private partnership. Post this came the opportunity to participate in the workshop on virtual reality and artificial intelligence for urban village studies. This is a small video clip to show how learnings from the workshop were drawn for the technology-driven outcomes that followed. preparation of the workshop helped us to derive technology-oriented solutions for the various issues which are brought forth in the before and after visuals. For example, the high density informal settlements addressing high density that led to poor living conditions and inadequate infrastructure, which posed serious health hazards leading to water stagnation and unsanitary conditions, where we proposed solutions involving covering and upgrading these drains with proper sewage infrastructure. Waste management and public hygiene, basically the streets of Ottawa that were often covered in hazardous waste marring the area's aesthetic character and posing health risks, were proposed to provide affordable housing with better amenities, improved infrastructure, and integrated spaces enhancing overall standards and cleanliness. The intervention further focuses on underutilized open spaces, specifically lack of green spaces, where we propose providing green spaces on vacant land, transforming neglected areas into valuable community assets. Furthermore, we also understand the critical issue of lack of parking. Our intervention suggests redeveloping these spaces to provide much needed parking facilities, alleviating congestion and improving accessibility. Moving on to community interaction spaces, which directly tackles poor living conditions, our proposal aims to encourage community living by creating spaces that foster interaction and improve the quality of life. Physical condition and safety of the buildings, which were basically degraded and lacked maintenance, where the proposal involves repairing and renovating building facades and structures to ensure integrated safety and vastly improve living conditions. Furthermore, the unauthorized developments and encroachments include addressing the issue of this encroachment on public land. The solution aims for unhindered street pathways with improved facade characteristics, creating clear and accessible public spaces. Unfinished streets and pathways, where damaged streets and pathways were unauthorized extensions encroaching upon them. The intervention is to provide pathways which were paved and had green walls enhancing functionality and aesthetic. The final intervention focuses on lack of walkable pathways due to inadequate pedestrian space, where the solution involves providing adequate, unobstructed and vehicular-free pedestrian pathways, ensuring safe and accessible routes for residents. To visualize our understanding for Ottawa's current state, we created an existing Ottawa model. This was initially rendered in D5 render and further generated as a model view through Prom AI. This process allowed for a detailed and realistic representation of the village's existing conditions. Building on our understanding, we then developed a proposed Ottawa model. This was generated through Prom AI and further iterated in Visoid, showcasing our proposed interventions and how Ottawa could be transformed into a more livable and sustainable urban village. So this is just a quick recap of how the interventions were proposed and have been applied through immersive technologies. So through this entire exercise, the lessons learned were infinite and immense. Urban villages are not relics of the past. The gaps that exist between formal planning mechanisms and informal growth, especially in the brownfield context, need addressal. The use of technology in mapping, data collection and analysis becomes imperative, and most importantly, this outlined and underlined the power of participatory engagement. The way forward is taking it and integrating it more robustly into our architectural curriculum and foster cross-disciplinary collaboration. Furthermore, bringing to you is a capacity building video where the community was engaged through AR and VR. Virtual reality has the power to transport us beyond the boundaries of our physical world, unlocking new possibilities for learning, empathy, and connection, transforming the way we experience life itself. Thus, here is the team behind the project, a collaborative effort between faculty and students from Chitkara School of Planning and Architecture. Gratitude to all collaborators, mentors, and community members whose support and insights made this journey meaningful and impactful. Thank you very much.